I'm Pastor Jon Marc, one of the pastors. Get to speak with you today. Looking forward to it, and just thankful that I can do it, man. I'm just thankful. So a question for you before we jump in, and I'm excited to jump in, but has anyone ever got something, you bought it, you pulled it into your life, that you were sure was going to make things so much better, only for it to do the opposite? Anybody? Okay, I'm just seeing hands. All right, okay, all right. So when Rosemary and I first got married, this was a few years ago, 25 plus years ago, we didn't really have anything. And one of the things we didn't have was a TV, which was fine. We actually lived, a cool story, we lived in the upstairs of the church. And it was like a little mini apartment there. And so when we wanted to entertain ourselves, cheap date night, we would go rent. I don't know if you know this, but at one point in the universe, there were things called video stores. And you could go rent a VHS tape, and you could plug it in. And so the nursery had one of those TVs, box TVs, mounted in the corner. Anybody remember that thing? And so it was mounted in the corner, and it had a spot for a VHS. So we'd go rent a movie and put it in, pop some popcorn, lay our sleeping bags down on the floor. What's not to love, right? It was great. Until someone said in the congregation, "Hey, you couldn't use a TV, could you?" Why, yes, we could. And so they gave us this, at one point in time, TVs weren't so small that you could just put them on a wall. We had these giant boxes of things. And the bigger the screen, the bigger the box. You remember that? So we had this huge TV that was given to us. It was something like 45 inches, which back then was pretty big. And so we were like, holy cow, we're rich. And the TV was great. I enjoy watching films and stuff. And so that was our TV for a number of years until it went down, it broke. Well, what does one do when one didn't save for a TV? One takes advantage of this really cool thing called 0% financing. Love that, right? And then if you're a dummy like I was back then and you don't read the fine print, you realize that 0% financing only means 0% financing for as long as you make every single payment exactly on time. And then some of you guys are nodding because you've been down this road, right? And then not only do they say, well, this would be fair. What would be fair is they're like, okay, you missed a payment, so from here on out, you're going to pay interest, and it's going to be exorbitant interest. But just from here on out. No, what they do is they go backwards from the start of the loan, and you start paying retroactively interest, right? And so we had this TV, and the thing was, I didn't want to go backwards. I had to get a TV that was at least as big as the TV that we already had. Not smart. And so looking back, what would have been better was paying what I could afford. That would have been better. Getting a small TV and paying cash. That would have been better. But in my mind, I couldn't go backwards. I had to get what was at least as good as what I had. And the sad thing was we had toddlers at the time. Judah is not in the building, so I can say it. I can throw him under the bus. He threw a sippy cup at the screen, milk drained at the bottom. Ethan, do you remember this? The TV had this milk stain at the bottom of the TV for years. And for part of those years, I was still making payments on this stupid TV, which, by the way, to make matters worse, Rosemary was not actually on board with this purchase from the get-go. So now you've got that little element, right? So when I say it made things miserable, it's true. It was a poor choice, and it cost me. That's an example, but we probably have a myriad of examples of that. And here's the thing. We are, as a culture, infatuated with the idea of better. We're chasing and obsessed with better bodies, better salaries, better influence, better freedom, and how about this? Better power, more power. Because here's what we think about power. Power is is like fuel for us to chase better. The more power we have, the more we can make things better. But what if better isn't? What if our version of better is actually not just not better, it's leading us astray and away from the things that we really need. And the Bible has a lot to say about this, and it actually doesn't pull punches. We're going to go there. But first, I want to just remind us that we're continuing our series called He's Him. It's been great. We just a recap, we've talked a lot about His kindness. We said that Jesus is the one who leaves the 99 and goes after the one. In another message, we said He's the one who meets us right where we are in our weakness. And He takes us to right there and takes us where He wants us to go. We said that He makes covenants with us in spite of our weakness. And last week was a great message from Clayton, and it was on He's the one who helps us. First of all, He sees us, and then He doesn't just do that. He heals us so we can see Him. It's a great message. You want to go listen to that on the podcast if you haven't had a chance to hear it last week. But today, we're going to camp on His power. And listen, make no mistake, Jesus is the central figure of all human history. He is the undisputed greatest, not only of all time, but of all eternity, right? He's unmatched in power, also unmatched in wisdom and in love and in compassion. He is not just some prophet or good teacher, but He is God in the flesh. And by what He did, He bridged the gap between heaven and earth for us. His life and His death conquered death itself and conquered sin. And His word transformed civilizations. His teaching transformed civilizations. His death and His resurrection, like I said, it conquered sin and death once and for all. And no other name has sparked more hope, changed more lives, started more movements, changed more hearts. So history is His story. He's Him. That's what we're saying as we're talking about today. That's kind of the umbrella for everything. But Hebrews 1:1-4, thanks for reading that melody. Just to recap, and then we're going to go back and we're going to read it again. We're going to really camp on this verse today. I like to do that. But the author of Hebrews, and we don't really know who that is. There's a couple of candidates, but that's a moot point here today. But here's what we do know is that the author of Hebrews was writing to Jews who were believers in Jesus. And they were located in Rome. So there's a lot of pressure on these believers. To place your trust in Christ at that time, you're getting pressure from all fronts, right? And so the interesting thing as the author of Hebrews is writing to these believers is he says over and over and over again, Jesus is better. Everybody say that with me, better. He says it because the temptation is to go backwards. The temptation is to go back to what you know. Pastor Tony talked about that in one of our messages when he was talking about Peter. That's the temptation, is to go back to what you know. But what the author is saying to the Hebrews is, listen, reflect on Jesus, and His power is unmatched. He's the one who made the world. He is the radiance of Yahweh, Yahweh's glory. He's the exact representation of His nature. Why would you choose anything but Him? Why would you go back to anything lesser than Him? He upholds all things by the word of His power, it says. Upholds all things. So think about all the things that concern you today, all the things that you're chasing and pursuing, all the things that are heavy on your heart today. He upholds all things by the word of His power. Power. We're drawn to power. We're drawn to power, period. Any kind of power, but here's the truth about power. Power, apart from Jesus, power polarizes. Did you know this? Have you noticed this? I started thinking about this and meditating on this about a year ago. I heard a podcast, and it started making me thinking. We were driving back from vacation, and I was thinking about this as we were coming into an election season, and I was thinking about how power polarizes based on 4 key human needs. I've got them on the screen there. It polarizes us. Identity. Identity is like this question of who am I really? So the next slide, if that's up there. Because fear motivates us. Fear of being silenced motivates this power of self-expression. We're attracted to, in other words, this power of self-expression. And I would say that you're polarized into this group, and you might notice here that we've got blue and red. Does this feel a little political? Maybe. And actually, very intentionally so. This is something I've just been noticing as I see how power polarized people into these groups. And opposite of each other, really. And they're asking, for those in the identity camp, they're asking this question, who am I really? And so if you find yourself really comfortable in conversations of inclusion and fluidity and celebrating uniqueness, you might be polarized to this group of identity. On the other side is security. And it's based on this, like, who will protect me instead of who am I? And the power there is protection based on this fear of being overrun. And if you're really comfortable in conversations about borders, guns, order, preserving tradition, and notice, these are really, they tend to be polar opposite of each other. Have you seen this in media? Have you seen this in conversations with friends and family? And on the same side, back on the other side, we have purpose. This is like, why am I here? And the fear is being stuck and not being able to do what you're supposed to do. And so we find that there's a real attraction to social justice and fixing issues. And again, it's that issue, that main need of purpose that we have. And finally, freedom. And I would just say the question is, how far can I go? How far can I go in life? And I would say, and again, I would just say this isn't the Word of God to you today. These are just my thoughts, okay? So this is just Jon Marc thoughts. But I've been meditating on a while, looking at Scripture, what Scripture has to say, and I feel like there's something to this. And again, we're polarized into these groups. And the stuff on the right, those in the column have a little bit in common. On the left, they have a little bit in common, but they're still different. And so individual rights, limited government, there's this fear of control, and the power there is autonomy. Have you seen this? Have you seen this, that power polarizes people? Again, the key here is away. Away from the center and away from each other. And as time goes on, that distance becomes greater and greater and greater. The interesting thing here is that I did put it in colors, in blue and red, but it's not just political. It's really all-encompassing of life. And here's the danger here, is that I've seen churches launch and tribalize out of this need. And that's the danger. I want to say, like, you're not in charge of a church, so this doesn't, it's not something you got to be careful of, but you want to just watch out for it. And if you feel like someone's leading you, one of the things that'll happen is you're like, this is a need I have, so I'm going to try to meet that need. And so now you're focused on, well, I'm not hearing enough security message. I need to go find a church that's focused on security. And they need to be talking about these things. And so, well, I'm not hearing enough identity. And I need to go over and to hear about these things. And so that's the temptation. And ultimately, we'll come back to this in a minute. Are you okay? We're still good. This is a tension topic. It's a little bit of a tension topic, and I'm okay leaning into it, because I think what we do when we lean into that is we allow the Lord to speak to us in the tensions. Okay, so ultimately, when we're faced with power, we really have two different possible perspectives. One is worship, and one is suspicion. All right, so worship meaning like, he's so powerful, maybe he can save me, maybe he can help me. That's so powerful, that can change things for me. Or, he's powerful, all right, maybe a little too powerful, right? Like, I don't trust that 1 minute. And so these are the two camps, and I think they bear relevance to this topic of Jesus' power today. While we're talking about power, maybe of a side note, but also maybe important to today's topic. Anybody see the movie? I had to talk about a movie here today, right? This is out. Anybody? Did you see it yet, Andres? Did you see it yesterday? What? Yesterday. All right. So we'll talk next weekend then. Okay. All right. So, what comes next? What a great ride. So there's a new movie out, new Superman movie, if you didn't know. How many Superman movies do we need? A super amount, apparently. And so in this iteration, reboot of Superman, Clark Kent is wrestling, once again, with identity, with purpose, and with sacrifice in a world that both hates him and needs him, right? That is a little bit of a tie-in with Jesus' power there. But some are worshiping him. Some are crying out to him to be saved, and others are suspicious, and they hate him. It's a fun film. If you get a chance to see it, I recommend it. It's actually pretty good, especially for a DC film. It's really good. You guys know, some of you know I'm Marvel. But I was thinking about this idea of super, the prefix super. It means above, right? Greater than, above. And I was thinking, what's the opposite of super? And that's the prefix in the English language is sub, beneath or below. And I think that's going to bear weight over the entire topic today, because our culture is suspicious of super churches. They're suspicious of super Christians. They're suspicious of religious power, is what I'm saying. And they may even hate religion, but it's harder to hate Jesus, isn't it? Our culture still, kind of crazy enough, still likes Jesus, which is interesting. But it's not totally surprising, because Jesus embodied power without corruption. So what Jesus does, and we're going to come back and talk about this, is that Jesus meets those four needs, those four key human needs of security, identity, purpose, and freedom. But he does it in a way that's unexpected. Everybody say unexpected. That's Jesus to a T. Describe Jesus, unexpected. I love how in The Chosen he says, they are like, well, that's different. And he was like, get used to different. I remember that from season 1. And he did that. And if you've watched The Chosen, for example, kind of really does a good job of showing us the personalities and the backstories of the different disciples and apostles. And so you see how each one of like Levi, for example, the tax collector, Peter, Simon, the zealot, each one of them has a human need that's a little bit different from the others. And they're polarized. They're against each other. And what Jesus does is he draws them away from the need and to him. Or in other words, he pulls them into him as the source of that need. Does this make sense? All right. And so over the course of the season, they begin to love one another. One of my favorite scenes, and I think it's in season 4, is where Peter runs to Matthew, Levi, and he runs to him and he embraces him and he hugs him, and they've been against each other the entire season. And he runs to him and he embraces him and he hugs him. And it's so powerful, and all because of what Jesus had done in his life. Oh, I'm getting off of my notes, but I love that scene. So Jesus does this. The author of Hebrews does this, is what he redirects our focus. Instead of on the need, he redirects the focus to Jesus. He says, let's focus on Jesus because he's better. The entire life, ministry, teaching, death of Jesus, all radiated with the theme of power. And, something we don't think about, I like, again, what the Chosen series does, is it shows us that it's very political, too. Not that Jesus was political, but because Jesus was there, everything got political. And because, why? Power. And so that's why Jesus was able to be killed. Now remember, he says, no one can kill me. I lay it down. But he was able to do that because of political alliances and political power and because of fear. Think about it. The people are amazed by him, that power, but the politicians were afraid of his power. The religious leaders were desperately afraid, and they rejected that power. But here's the key thing. He wasn't after their power. He wasn't after their thrones. That's what they thought. They thought, well, that's what power does. Power tanks. Because in order to get better, you have to add. You have to add to you. And they didn't know, because no one on the planet knew yet, that Jesus better happened through subtraction. And this is I'm getting ahead of myself here, but he came to build a kingdom that was not of this world, that really, where power wasn't taken, but it was laid down. Where a king doesn't just crush his enemies, but he dies for them. Really, what Jesus did throughout his life and ministry on earth during those 3 years, what he did was he said, I'm better, choose me. He started his very first conversation. He said, hey, I'm better, choose me. And that's why we see fishing nets left on the seashore. because they realized that they were chasing the wrong thing. So here's my first point today, is that we're chasing better. If you're taking notes today, I would encourage you just kind of write that down, and it'll help you process this later. We're chasing better. From the Garden of Eden to today's headlines, we have always believed that there's something out there that's better. The grass is always greener, right? On the other side. So because we're chasing better, especially in the context of this polarized culture, insecurity has a casualty count. It really does. And we chase better because we think that better is stronger, safer, freer. Now, I was thinking about this in context of the book of Hebrews. 13 different times the author says that things are better with Jesus. The word is kriton. That's the Hebrew word, kriton. So in Hebrews 11:16, it says, they desired a better country. And this was spoken of in a positive angle about Abraham. He uses Abraham in the next verse as an example of faith. They desired a better country. Everybody say better? So by faith, Abraham, in verse 17, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son. What does that remind you of? Of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. What does that remind you of? So this is interesting, tie-in, kind of looking forward to Jesus. He's him. So Abraham was being praised for faith here and looking to something better. And what Hebrews says is that something was actually a someone better, a better hope, better covenant, better promise is some of the things that we see in the book of Hebrews. By the way, this is my recommendation today, a little plug. Go read the book of Hebrews. It's a deep book, and you have to go slow. You really got to go slow with Hebrews. You can't just fast track 5 chapters in a sitting. You got to go slow because there's a lot there. But so what God does is he's commending Abraham for his faith, but that's not the whole story. Anybody know the whole story of Abraham? Abraham of faith here, of the Hall of Faith, wasn't always Abraham. He was Abram from Ur of the Chaldeans. That was the land he was from. He was from the land of Ur. And verse 7 of chapter 15 of the book of Genesis says, I am the Lord who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you the land to possess. So God promised him that he would be the father of many nations. But he was from Ur. Everybody say Ur. He's from Ur. Now, we're not from Ur, but we kind of are. I heard another pastor say this, and I think it bears repeating here today. We're from better, stronger, richer, because we're infatuated with Ur. We're trying to get Ur. And we're not okay with where we are. We're trying to get Ur, no matter where we are. And so God, think about it. God promised him, you're going to be the father of many nations. Now, right now, currently, he has how many children? 0. You're going to be the father of... So, what does one do when one wants to have children? Well, if you're married, you sleep with your wife. So that was really, and I think that's a great deal, If God makes a covenant with me and says it's contingent upon one point, I want you to do this one thing. I'm just, I'm listening here, Lord. I will obey. Now, the thing is, how many times? Until, right? Keep doing it. And I would say this, what you do when things aren't getting better shows what you're chasing. What you do when things aren't getting better shows what you're chasing. And so Abraham, I think, I can say it here from this point of history, it's easy to judge, but it seems like he was chasing better instead of chasing God. God gave him a promise, but he said, here, listen, I'm going to fulfill this. I need you have one job, Abraham. It's sleep with your wife. But it wasn't working. Now, I don't know. We can infer from the context that he did sleep with his wife at least once. But, they're older and things are stacked against them. And so what he does is, it's not working. I've got to do something better. And so he sleeps with someone better in his eyes, which is his younger slave servant girl. Well, we all know, we can see geography around us, wars tell us that was not a good idea. All that's happened from then to now in the Middle East all happened because of Abraham's decision to do something he thought was better. And he ended up with a child out of this union with his wife, which is where God promised that he would fulfill that. And he did eventually with Isaac. But before that, before Isaac, was someone else, Ishmael. Yeah. And so he thought it was going to be better. It was not better. So here's the encouragement to you. Are you doing what God told you to do? If so, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Don't shift. Don't change. Don't try to do something better. If you're doing what God told you to do, keep doing it. Because here's the thing. Faithfulness is not defined vertically on the timeline. It's defined horizontally. So keep doing it. Get back up again. Keep doing it. Keep obeying. Abraham, again, I think he chose better. He had the right promise, but the wrong person. He had the right word, but the wrong way. And so many times that is for us, because he was from Ur. It's the Apple Store syndrome, man. You get it, and then immediately after you get it, there's something better, right? And social media does that to us too. It crushes us into comparing. Here's what we do. We compare our failures against other people's filters. And Theodore Roosevelt put it this way: that kind of comparison is the thief of joy. It's maybe Theodore Roosevelt. Who knows these days with quotes? It's how it's attributed online. So we'll just go with it. It was Teddy. And that's what we're up against here when it comes to chasing better. Chasing better turns blessings into burdens. And again, it's especially true in this polarized culture. Why? Because it's us against them. And here's why this message matters today. Because there's a huge cost, guys. There's a huge cost with chasing better. It's a huge cost. And I'm not just talking about financial, although we could definitely talk about the financial cost of chasing better, but this isn't about financial responsibility. There's a huge emotional cost of chasing better. Even if you don't act on doing something, but internally, there can be a huge cost with just chasing better with your eyes. And that's why it's breaking that one of the 10 Commandments not to covet. Coveting is just looking and saying, I should have that, even if you're not doing anything about it. And what it does is it does internal damage to your soul. Think about all those things that maybe you're chasing, whatever that might be. Promotion, relationship, house, car, whatever it might be. There's a myriad of examples of that. Would it really be better? Would it really be better? Or would it just be different? Which I only say because we've all experienced, I said that from the top, we've all experienced a time where we thought it would be better with that, right? Oh, man, I'm going to be meddling now for a moment here, but relationships are a prime example of this, right? Like, this person could do no wrong. They are God's gift to the planet. And then now you're on the other side going, girl, I know where this is going. Talk to me in 3 months, Or the new job, Wait till the shine wears off, And the new job is worse than the old job. That new manager is 10 times, you know how this is, right? Would it really be better? I love what Jim Carrey said about this. Yeah, I'm going to quote Jim Carrey right now. Boom. Here's what he said. I wish everybody could get rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of so they would know it's not the answer. And he would know. He would know. I shake. Sorry. It's a thing I inherited from my mom. It's not better. In a polarized culture, this plays on our insecurity. And the lie is that the more power that we have, the more security that we'll have. The more significant identity we have, the more freedom we'll have. But here's the truth. Power without Jesus turns kings into captives. Power without Jesus turns kings into captives. Power without Jesus, it does the exact opposite of what you think it's going to do. And if you keep chasing better, you're always going to feel behind. Because better is always moving. Too fast. Can't catch up. Jesus is better. Choose Jesus. Find rest. So we're chasing better, number one. Number two, we need to reframe better. Now we're going to dive into Hebrews 1. All right, Hebrews 1. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son. No pause. So again, Hebrews is shifting our focus to Jesus is the better. Jesus is the better. And let me just pause right here. And when we're saying Jesus is better, we're not saying that he's the next version. No, Jesus is the final word. Remember, Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill them. And so he's the final word on what's better. There isn't anything better after, right? He's not Yahweh 2.0. He is Yahweh, the exact representation of Yahweh. God that's when we say Yahweh, we're talking about God of the Old Testament. I am, the one who said to Moses, I am. And again, 13 times, the book of Hebrews, it's actually Greek. I said Hebrew, but it's actually Greek. That's better. Better than prophets, better than angels, better than heroes, better than hopes. And here's the encouragement to you today. We got to redefine better. I'm going to put a little bit more on it. A little bit more urgency. If you don't redefine better, better will redefine you. What if better is not higher? What if better is deeper? What if better is not a feeling? What if better is a foundation? There will never be anything better, friends, than Jesus. Let's read our main text again in verse 2. In these last days he has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also made the world. This is his power. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power, when he had made purifications of sins. Let me read that again. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. Pause. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become so much better than the angels, to the extent that he has inherited a more excellent name than they. Oh, man, there's so much here, and I feel like I'm already running out of time, but having become so much better. Well, I thought Jesus was the same yesterday, today, and forever. So how does Jesus become better? He didn't become better. He didn't level up. He became better in the eyes of the beholder. Because the more time you spend with Jesus, the more he gets. There's a song I remember my mom would sing. He gets sweeter and sweeter as the days go by. Anybody remember that? From back in the day. Oh, what a love between my Lord and I keep falling in love with him over and over and over and over again. He gets better. Better to you. And not only does he become better the way that you see him, but he changes the way you see other things and other people. And here's my little encouragement here / warning. If you're not prioritizing time with Jesus, better will become an idol to you. And this is why I'll just say, I think it's an indictment against the American church why we can't stay at a church for very long, because better is an idol. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time and a season for heading to a new church. There absolutely is. God leads us out. But when he leads us out with joy, not leads us out with hurt, leads us out with pain. And so this better is an idol, and what it promises is that it's going to meet our needs. That's how you know it's an idol. If you need to change things in order for Jesus to meet your needs, is Jesus meeting your needs, or are you meeting your needs? And so the promise is that there's going to be power for security. In the context of church, it's never to be hurt again. I'll be safe because I'll leave the hurt. I'm meddling, I know, I apologize, but it's power for identity. You can feel important at the new church. And again, I think about this, how did Jesus model this for us? Was he super and above, or would he submit himself to what God asked him, his Father asked him to submit himself to? Power for purpose, to leave a mark, and power for freedom, to live on your own terms and to be able to do what you want to do because you're being confronted by some leadership about something in your life, and you're not here for it. You're not trying to hear for it. Be there for that, and so we got to move on because the Lord is leading you. Oh man, I'm meddling, I know. But this is the tension I'm leaning into today. But Jesus promised that he would meet our needs, but he also promised us a cross. He promised us a cross. And he said that his burden would be light, but it's not about being super. It's not about being above the problems and above the issues and the security and the pain. It's about submitting to him in the pain and in the problems and the issues. Can you see the difference? And so here's my final point today. We're still good? I tend to go long, and I apologize, but I just love this stuff so much. So point number 3. So we said that we chase better. We need to redefine better. And number 3, don't use culture's scale. Use Christ. And here it is in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 through 9 says, here's the scale. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges and took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Therefore, God elevated him. I'll pause right there. Therefore, God elevated him. So listen, if you're a Christ follower and you're chasing Jesus, S doesn't mean super, it means submitted. It means submitted. And not submitted vertically once in the timeline, but submitted faithfully over the course of your life. Continuing to submit. If you fall, get back up. Submit again. And don't beat yourself up. Don't let shame be your guide. Don't let shame be your God. But let Jesus be your guide and Jesus be your God. And he's always calling you back up. Listen, today's the day. Do that. I'd say this too. If you're trying to decide, is God in something, just because life got easier doesn't mean it got better. Because often that easier thing is a seed that when planted, how many know, is going to grow into something that is miserable and destructive. Easy doesn't mean better. Sometimes hard. As a matter of fact, often hard means better. This is, as a dad of 4 boys, is something I'm trying to, really beat that gong over and over again, right? As a parent, we know that's true. But better, what the world often says better is ultimately busier. What the world says better is often emptier and often lonelier. as that seed develops and grows. But remember, that's not how Jesus taught us what better is. Or Jesus, he didn't come to seize power to get security. He gave up power to secure what? Your identity, my identity, your freedom, my freedom, our purpose, right? So, and think about this too, as we're looking at Jesus as a model. Some people wish Jesus would have just pointed to himself a lot more and said, like, I'm it. But you know, he had a habit, and he did it, I think, intentionally, so we could model after him. He wasn't pointing to himself. He was always pointing to his Father, and he's always pointing to the Holy Spirit. But then what do the Father and the Holy Spirit do? They point back to Jesus. And they're like, listen, guys, it's all about Jesus. You want to experience the Father. You want to experience the Trinity. You want to experience God. Start with Jesus. Jesus is the key to open the door, right? But Jesus didn't point to himself because he didn't need to, because he knew who he was and he knew whose he was. This is a little side note for anyone who's seen Superman. Did anyone see it? Am I the only one? Okay, you saw it. All right, a handful. Okay, a couple people. So I'll speak to you, and then the rest of you, you might have seen a trailer, and this scene might pop back in your head. All right, so there's this one moment, and this isn't a spoiler because it happens pretty early on, and it's in the trailer, but this is one moment where Superman is mortally wounded. He's hurt real bad. And what does he need? Well, he needs to go and soak up, anybody? The sun. Hello. That'll tie in. He needed to go and not just have a little dose of the sun. He needed to go because he was hurt so bad. He needed to have an intensive session of magnifying the sun. So these robots do it for him, right? Well, you don't have robots, but you can soak up the sun. And I'll tell you, if you're hurt, there's no better place to go. So now when you see that movie, that little moment will be like, yes, that's the gospel. We like to do that in my house. We like to look for the gospel in films. So better isn't defined, though, by comfort. It's defined by Christ. It's defined by Christ. So don't use the culture scale. Use Christ's scale. Jesus is better. So here's the encouragement. Choose Jesus. Choose Jesus. Jesus shows us, too, that better is often found in brokenness. And so as we talk about reframing better, here's one of my encouragements to you. If you're in a season of brokenness today, that might mean better. Michelangelo was once asked how he sculpted David. You familiar with this magnificent piece of art? Okay, he was once asked, how did you sculpt David from a block of marble? Because you can't mess up, right? You can't. It's like marble. You got to get first try. So he was asked, how did you sculpt David? And he said, well, I just removed everything that wasn't David. And I was thinking about, too, like I just learned something this week because I'm an artist, a graphic designer. That's what I do for a living. And I've been leaning into generative AI. Anybody know about generative AI? So you're using artificial intelligence to create things. And so I learned that I designed the series, the graphic for our series here with generative AI. I gave it some prompts, and it created it. But I learned that, that one. I learned that what it does is it does it through a process of something called diffusion. And what it does is it starts with a ton of noise, and then it just removes everything but the image based on the prompt. Yeah? And so I think that here's a couple of examples of creation that's out there in the artistic world that is true in the spiritual world. And if you're being broken down, that might mean that you're becoming better. You're not falling apart. You're being rebuilt. But remember, power polarizes us. It splits us apart. But here's the good news, and I'm going to start bringing it to a close. You know how preachers say that. When we stop chasing better and we start chasing Jesus, here's what he does. He draws us inward. So we're going to come back to that polarizing chart, here's the good news, is that Jesus doesn't take sides, he takes over. And when he does that, he draws us inward to him. And we're faced with, in our entire culture, when we see Jesus in his power, we're faced with those two choices, worship or suspicion. But here's my encouragement to you. If you're here in the house today, you're listening online, Jesus is worthy of worship. He's proven himself trustworthy. And I understand the doubt. I understand the suspicion. And here's the good news. He welcomes it. You can bring your suspicion to the foot of the cross. He'll meet you right where you are. He did with Thomas. He'll do that with you. He's the only one worthy because he modeled submission. Even though he had all the power, he showed us what it was like to humble himself. So when he calls me to submit, that's a no-brainer. Yes, sir. Because he completely fills our every need. And to these up here, here's what he says. For your identity, Galatians 4:7 paraphrase, he says, you're no longer slaves, but you're God's own child. And I put it on the screen this way. You are mine. To those that are struggling with security, he draws you in, and he says, from John 10:28, he says, I'm the good shepherd. My Father and I, there's nothing more powerful than us. And I put it on the screen this way. You're safe in me. No one can snatch you from my hand. I hope you're hearing the voice of Jesus calling you today, because he's doing it right now. You're listening online, he's doing it right now. Ephesians 2:10, for purpose. He says, for we are God's masterpiece. He created us anew in Christ Jesus so we could do the good things that he planned for us long ago. Jesus said, you're sent not to perform, but to serve. And then freedom. Jesus says, you're free indeed. Not to do whatever you want, but to be who I made you to be. Galatians 5:1 says, so Christ has truly set us free. Now, make sure that you stay free. Everybody say, stay free. And don't get tied up again in slavery to the law. So here's the good news, friends. Even though chasing better leads to burnout, choosing Jesus leads to peace. And if you want peace, listen to the words of Jesus. He said, come to me, all you are heavy burdened. I'll give you rest. One of the ways that we're most heavy burdened is by chasing better. Always got to be, always got to do, always got to perform, never good enough, got to keep pressing, got to keep working, smarter, harder, stronger, faster, burnout. Until Jesus. Rest. Rest. If you're suffering the huge emotional cost of chasing better, reminder here is anything without better, anything that's better without Jesus is slavery. But Jesus is better. So again, reminder, and the huge pinpoint here today is to reframe what you call better. Stop chasing better and start chasing Jesus. So what does this mean on a Monday? We're going to head to communion in a moment, but what does this mean on a Monday? Well, here's what it means. Start a new habit. If you aren't prioritizing time with Jesus, let's just real talk here. You can. No shame. Start today. Start tonight. And here's just the three points to do that on. One, choose a time and a place. Wherever you want. Choose a time and a place. Your closet, by your bedside. A friend of mine, he does it in the parking garage. It's kind of cool. Every time I come out from work, he's over in the corner, just praising God. So you choose a time and a place. Activities. What are you going to do? I got to plan a date with my wife when I go. So what are you going to do when you spend time with Jesus? Were you going to pray? You're going to thank him. You're going to share your thoughts and your feelings and your hurts and your frustrations. It's not about answers. It's about sitting in his awe of how good he is. And, when you're in his presence, the things of the world can fade away. And you really see him as better and above all the things that have been weighing you down and all the things that are causing you to be depressed and disillusioned. And you realize, oh man, you're better. Jesus, you're better. And then, so you're doing those, choose a time and a place, choose activities, and then be patient and be persistent. If you feel like things aren't changing, aren't getting better, remember, what you do in those moments when things aren't getting better shows who you're chasing. If things aren't getting better, keep seeking Jesus. Keep seeking Jesus.